Everybody hear Jeff all right? Good. All right. Well, I will go ahead and turn it over to Jeff to kick it off, and then you guys can just fire away with questions after that. So turn it over to you, Jeff.
Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. And I'm excited to share a little bit with our program and take your questions and see where I might help you build your view of our program and what's going on in college athletics. Let me just open by saying, gosh, I would imagine you've all noticed the convergence of so many things right now into intercollegiate athletics, particularly the COVID-19 and not only the student athlete challenges to play competitions, but also the financial impact, which is huge in our industry and unlike anything we've seen. And added to that is the name, image, and likeness legislation, both from the NCAA and the federal government that's getting involved. Each day we see additional bills come out or learn of new bills that are about to come out regarding name, image, and likeness. And certainly we're all beginning to see the impact of the transfer deregulations, even though it doesn't take place, I think, until July 1 or August 1. We see the transfer portal flooded with potential transfers, and particularly right now, college football. We've also seen the latest on the Alston case. And at some level, the Supreme Court is going to look at that and analyze it. And again, I haven't had a chance to really look at that decision or really visit with others about what it means, but certainly they're taking a look at it, and there may be things that come from that. So, and then I think the Knight Commission recommendations that have come out recently, that's a really a think tank body that offers their views on intercollegiate athletics, and from time to time they've had interesting perspectives, and certainly this is one that we are reviewing and looking at in college athletics today. Obviously here we've just finished the recruiting season for football, the first signing date, also obviously the completion of our season, the shortened season, even below the 10 games that we scheduled at the beginning of the year. We completed only 9 due to the cancellation of Texas. So it has been a highly unusual year in college football. Obviously the championship games this weekend, and then hopefully the college football playoffs behind that. And then we'll move to really much more of a focus on the college basketball season. You've seen the impact of no fans and the ability for us now to have a limited number of fans that we're very grateful for. But to get back to football, obviously it was not the season we had hoped. But we also know from the beginning of this transition to Coach Miles and building our football program that this was a building process. And again, I don't need to tell you all that. You follow us very closely and know what we've been like for over the last 8 to 10 years. And yes, we were not pleased with the success on the field. And again, at times, didn't see the kind of progress that we had hoped. But again, there have been so many things impacting this year, and not only for Kansas, but every college football team. I am really comfortable with Coach Miles and his continuing to build the program. As you guys know, we started a Break the Cycle campaign fundraising-wise. That's a 5-year program, and again, we're in basically the second year of that 5-year plan. We have a lot of work to do. We had a lot of work to do when we began this process 2 years ago. I think we're pleased with the recruiting class signed yesterday, and then the prospects of maybe adding a couple more in the February signing date. I do think that it is promising that we had 2 rankings in the top 50, something we haven't had in back-to-back years in quite some time, back to the Orange Bowl time that we hear so much about, 2008, 2009. So I think that's encouraging, but I think it's going to take those recruits and obviously building strength and conditioning wise in the off season, and then our coaches to continue to coach and recruit during spring practice and, just get better. I think we would agree, or at least I certainly believe we saw some great young talent out there. Certainly young players are getting experience they might not otherwise would have expected due to the COVID impact, the opt-outs, and really the size of our junior and senior and fifth-year senior classes. So again, as we look at this, we could anticipate it, and we did anticipate that this would be a challenging year. In addition, we're making that convergence from relying on junior college student athletes to fill our program to the commitment, and I will say it's unwavering, and I think you can see it in this class signed yesterday. We're making this change and this build with high school student athletes because we think that those are the young people who will most likely be here. They'll be able to train, condition, and to compete in this league and any Power 5 league, you've got to compete with third, fourth, and fifth-year players. So the process is continuing it. I know it's an overused term, but it is a process. We didn't get into our condition overnight, and we won't build out of it overnight. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions and see what is on your mind and how I can help.
Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, just since you're already talking about football, what are your kind of expectations for 2021? What should fans realistically expect from this program next year?
Improvement. And I think more freshmen coming into play, those freshmen becoming sophomores, and improvement. And then I'm sure you're thinking about what's the record. I don't have a record in my mind. We have to improve. We need to win. I think we'll benefit from spring practice. We'll benefit from conditioning, strength and conditioning in the winter and the summer. I think we'll benefit from a non-conference schedule. Hopefully we'll be able to have a regular non-conference schedule, and then we'll go in better prepared to compete in the Big 12. But, I honestly believe we're going to be better. I think how much better remains to be seen. It depends on how we compete and how we prepare for next season. But I do think that some of these young players have gotten experience that will be helpful. But also I admit that some of the young players were overmatched because just the physical maturation of football players were overmatched in many of these games. But they've gotten, on the bright side, they've gotten experience. They'll utilize that experience. Now it's up to our coaches to build upon that experience and, build some consistency in our program with the student athletes playing next to each other, but also consistency amongst our coaching staff as well.
And in terms of scholarship numbers, that's been an issue for this program for a long time. How close should they be to 85 next year?
Well, we'll be closer, but again, at this point, we don't know candidly if we're going to have more student athletes enter the transfer portal, and if they leave us, what's our ability to apply for waivers to get additional scholarships above the caps. We'll be closer. We're not there yet. It's always hard to put a finger on that number, Benton, because, a number of our scholarships were filled with walk-on student athletes. And I think that we are recruiting a higher level of student athlete. And I think that we will have fewer walk-ons earning those scholarships and being put on scholarships simply because we have money available. So I think we're building a roster, and we will need a roster of 85 legitimate scholarship student athletes to compete in the Big 12 and in the Power 5, no question.
Hey, you mentioned the transfer portal a couple of times. Number one, how alarming is it that you see guys going into that and leaving the program when you're trying to build it? And number two, I asked Les this yesterday, just the idea of Kansas dipping into that to try to maybe help offset that a little bit. Are you guys open to that?
Certainly, it's a reality. We talked about it a year ago. We've talked about it when this legislation appeared. My frustration on a national level is we talk about we have to wait and see the impact of the transfer portal. We already know the impact of the transfer portal. It's being flooded every day, every season that's completed. More go into it. We'll see more go in after after these conference playoffs, after the bowls are played. And so it's a reality, and we are working our way through it. It's new to us. Certainly, I think Coach Miles indicated yesterday that he's held a couple spots. We are committed to building with high school students, but we also have to have our eyes open to 4-year transfers, because we think 4-year transfers with eligibility remaining really does fit our mold of trying to build with high school players. And I'm not going to say that occasionally in the future we might take a junior college player. We might, but we're not going to fill our class like 2018, where we had 20 plus junior colleges, student athletes in one class. So we're committed to that. We think that'll make us a stronger program, enable us to build on this program. But we have to monitor the transfer portal. Thankfully, we've built that back of the house staff with our recruiting analysts and such, so they can follow those for us. Otherwise, we were undermanned, underpositioned, so to speak, being able to manage the new reality of the transfer portal.
Yeah, and since you brought that up, let me ask this real quick too. With regard to that additional staff that you brought into the program and the resources there, considering the financial climate and the hit that everybody's taken from COVID, are there concerns about being able to maintain, that initial level that you built it at, or do you have any idea on that yet?
Matt, that's a great question. Obviously, or not obviously, wrong term. Certainly, every area of our program has been impacted by the financial crisis caused by COVID, and that includes football. There are some positions that we may not be able to fill there for a time being, but I think I know that we are committed to maintaining that level of support for football. We know that is where we have our biggest opportunity to make progress financially and on the impact of our brand on our university. So we have to stay committed to having resources in there. But they have taken salary cuts from the coaches. They have taken some things that we have not purchased in the equipment wise and things like that we have to, share this impact around all our programs. But we remain committed to making sure we have the resources. And candidly, and it's a tough time after a winless season, but we've got to call upon our donors again to continue to support us. It's going to take an investment, an increased investment, additional investment to keep our football coming. And I think we do have momentum. We haven't seen it on the football field this season, but I think we have in other things that we're doing, and particularly in recruiting.
Jeff, do you have an expectation of who will benefit from the transfer rule, right? You have kind of a unique situation. You've got one program that's a power program and up and running and kind of feeding itself, and then another program that's on the build. Is that, there's a lot of theories out there. I've heard a lot of other people's. I'm just curious what your expectations are on who's going to benefit, who's going to hurt from this.
Yeah, Soren, it's just like in recruiting. We're going to play up what the opportunities we have for players to come in and participate and play early. I think if you take the example of a young person that maybe has been sitting behind an upperclassman for a couple years, and now we've had the NCAA say that those seniors can have an additional year, those super seniors. Now they've sat for 2 years and they have the prospect of having to sit a third year. They may say, hey, I've got the opportunity to go to Kansas and play early and play now. And I think that's the attractiveness of what Kansas has to offer. Other schools will have their other things that they sell, but And I think, Soren, honestly, it'll take 2 to 3 years for this to settle out. I think the transfer portal will be huge, and then I think over time, where student athletes learn that it isn't always green, the path isn't always greener, but it'll be a couple year period before that settles down. I think, again, 2 to 3 years, we're going to see a portal very, very active, and it'll always be somewhat active.
Just to double back on something you mentioned earlier, you said spring football is going to be really important. So that means right now it looks like the calendar is going to be the calendar, and everything will be as normal, not as normal, right? In the world we're in, but hopefully getting towards normal. But you anticipate the calendar being what the old calendar was, not having anything shut down.
Yeah, we anticipate we'll be able to have a full spring. I believe we haven't released finalized that date, but I know we're pushing him back a little bit. Our campus calendar helps us in that regard, because we're in effect taking our spring break and putting it at the front of the semester. So our classes don't actually start till February 1st. Our football student athletes will come back and begin that reintroduction testing around January 24th. And I know Coach Miles and his staff now are focusing on trying to, when we start our spring practice, when the spring game will be. The additional piece that we have is that practice will flow in consecutive weeks. In the last 2 years, Coach Miles I believe the spring break has fallen in there, and we've had a week where spring practice didn't occur, and then they came back. I personally think it's good to have those consecutive weeks, and we'll be able to do that this year. And I do think that'll help the development of our players.
Do you have any thoughts on the Supreme Court going to be listening to, basically revenue that can be used towards players' caps on compensation for playing? Do you have an initial reaction to it?
Yeah, I need to understand it better, but I do think that they are going to look at, I hope they're going to help us look at keeping a clear demarcation between amateur, so-called collegiate amateur sports and professional sports. And I think they will go to that cap of educational funds. And, I think right now I'm hoping that there is some level of cap there, that it's not an open market for people to recruit with. I think we need somewhat of a level playing field. Soren, what I don't know yet is how that impacts their decision, and how that would impact the legislation coming out of the Senate or the House regarding name, image, and likeness. So that's a complicated puzzle. They will impact each other. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. We will obviously follow that closely.
Hey, Jeff, Les wasn't making excuses late in the season, but on one of the late games, you guys had 35 players on the do not dress list, and then also had other opt-outs. I just wondered, from your chair, now that the season's over with, were you having discussions late in the season about, should we be playing? Can you kind of take us into sort of the number situation and kind of what you guys were going through late in the season, and potentially, kind of the circumstances you guys were dealing with?
Yeah, Jesse, that's a good question. But that's really medical discussion, medical decisions. The players that are out or affected by COVID or contrast out, that's not something Coach Miles and I manage or engage in. That's really the medical team telling us who's available and who's not, and whether we meet those the minimum criteria set up by the conference at the beginning of the year. And it was quarterback, offensive line, and interior defensive line that were the three categories, plus the 53 overall roster. So those numbers were managed by the team physicians, Kansas Team Health.
Hey, Jeff, have you guys begun to explore, when a vaccine is more widely available, how that will be rolled out to athletes, and whether you will require that and keep track of their enrollment and usage of that?
Yeah, we're obviously. I think this is obvious. We're further down the pecking order than obviously the first responders and healthcare workers, and then those in the assisted living and retirement homes situation. Student athletes, are in that category that they're not at a high risk of long-term illness or long-term complications if they get the virus. So we'll be further down. We rely on the chancellor's pandemic medical advisory team. I sit in on it on a regular basis. They're the group that reviews our numbers in athletics on our campus, in our county, state, nation, and they track those trends. They'll also be tracking the distribution of the virus or the vaccine, excuse me. So we'll rely on them. And again, they're very much in the weeds and very much part of that. And when we're able to do that, both for our students when they come back and student athletes, that'll be managed by, in our case, the Watkins Health Center on campus, and then through our Kansas Team Health physicians. So we're confident that when it's appropriate, we'll have those vaccines available. We've already started the kind of education process with student athletes and staff about the virus because, as you well know, not everyone is anxious to receive the virus. But we believe it's safe, and we believe it'll help us get our student athletes back to competition on a regular basis and training and practice, and really get a more normal campus life, which is important to us as well.
Jeff, I wondered what kind of impact the Florida situation with the young man who collapsed on the court. What kind of impact did that have on your department? And then obviously Coach K has been pretty outspoken about should we be playing as well. We've heard what Coach Self has to say about that stuff. What are your conversations, or how has that impacted your office and your thinking?
Well, like everybody, we're concerned for the young man there at Florida. And, I do not know at this point, and you guys may have more information than I do on what that health issue was. I think we think that it's probably COVID related, but we really don't know at this point, I don't think. Certainly it causes us to pause, but it also causes us to be thankful for Kansas Team Health and the cadre of physicians that we have available, and the Big 12 Conference and the medical teams of the Big 12 Conference. They meet on a regular basis. They've advised us on the testing coming out of COVID infection. We have those heart testing procedures in place. And so we believe we're providing a safe environment for our student athletes to compete. As you know, the NCAA provided that opt-out. If there's any student athlete who's not comfortable competing during this COVID time, they can opt out without any repercussions. But we wouldn't be moving forward if we didn't think and believe through our medical teams that we were providing a safe environment for our student athletes to compete. So we believe it's safe based on all the data and information we have, and that's analyzed by people far more intelligent than I, and work on that every single day. So I trust them. I trust our team here. I trust the team assembled across the Big 12 Conference. So it's certainly of concern, but I'm confident we're providing a safe environment.
Do you have any update on the men's basketball NCAA situation, and has that timeline at all been affected by COVID?
I believe the timeline has been affected by COVID. I know that the NCAA has had to take pauses in their program due to COVID, but they've also had furloughs in the enforcement area during this time because of the financial crunch they're experienced. So yes, I can't give you a time period that it's been delayed a week, a month, or 6 months, but it has been delayed. I think we're closer to getting the next step from the forgetting the acronym of the IARP, excuse me. We'll get a timeline of what's to happen next, and we're in that phase. We're waiting to receive that at this point.
Jeff. So about a year ago, you and I spoke about ESPN Plus and fans being super upset about having to use that streaming service. Now so much has changed. Will you talk about how excited you are to still have that relationship with that streaming service, because how everything is happening? And then kind of a second part is, how are the COVID procedures going in Allen Fieldhouse with the games?
Yeah, the ESPN Plus streaming model, again, to use that overused term, is a process. Began with us. You notice we had a number of high-profile games on early last season to incentivize our fans to pay the $4.99, or it might be $5.99 now. I don't know, but we've seen incredible growth in that area. We've seen the Disney Plus model. I think the last time I saw it was maybe 80 million in Disney Plus and such. I may be off on that number, but that has grown significantly. There's been steady growth in ESPN Plus. We see no signs that ESPN is slowing down their expansion of the streaming services. We see many more people getting into the streaming business. I think the SEC's new agreement has some streaming in it. It still remains to be seen how much. They do have their own network, so it would be less than what we're doing. But streaming is here to stay. It's only going to get better. And I think we'll see the interesting thing, over time, we'll see bundling of streaming services as well. And then I guess we'll go through a period where we unbundle them again. So it seems to be the business cycle. As technology changes, things will continue to change. But as a Big 12, we still believe that the streaming services is the future and is where it's going. And we think we're in some ways ahead of the game because we've started down that path earlier than most.
Yeah, and then how have the procedures been going in Allen Fieldhouse with everyone being kind of separated?
Yeah, great question. Again, that our pandemic medical advisory team observes us to be an independent group to make sure that we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. We've situated our fans with social distancing outside their groups. So if you have a party of 4 people, you're going to sit together, but there's going to be 6 feet of distance from you in all directions from that. Our fans have been outstanding wearing their masks, and that's a key to this. Our students have been very good. We always want to do better, but our students were very good wearing their mask in the games. So again, not only do I think our procedures are going well, more importantly, the pandemic medical advisory team observation of our protocols, our procedures, our monitoring, our making sure we remind our fans to keep their mask on or put them back on if they take them off, are going very well. If they don't, that's one of the things that the pandemic medical advisory team will take into account when they allow us to have fans. I think we released yesterday or today that they have agreed to have, we can now have fans through January 2nd, I believe. Is that right, Dan?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we will have fans on a limited basis now through January 2nd.
We got time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Just following up on that, after January 2nd, do you think it'll still be weekly? And will the holiday break kind of delay that group meeting and making those decisions, or do you know?
No, great question. No, we have meetings already scheduled. So, and it will be weekly. They may make a decision that the numbers and when I say the number of positives, the number of hospital beds taken in Lawrence and Kansas City, the number of people on respirators or intubators, whatever you call those machines that keep you alive. They monitor all that incredibly closely. They make predictions. I watch all kinds of statistical data on my screen that is well above my knowledge base when it comes to stats. But, they make those decisions based on those trends and what they see happening with the virus. And it will be made weekly. But if they see a trend that's happening, they could do it over a couple weeks. But I'm thinking because of the winter and what we're going through, it'll be on a weekly basis.
Cool. And let me give my last one, and then I'll shut the heck up. You mentioned the Knight Commission and that recommendation. Obviously, rebuilding here has been a giant task and continues to be that. When you see those types of recommendations, does it give any extra anxiety about, hey, we got to get this program going, we got to get up where we can be, so that, you know, we're not left behind if that ever were to happen? I know it's just a recommendation right now, and I know none of it's even remotely been thought all the way through, but in terms of just the uneasy or anxiety type feelings that you have that are already probably there, do those increase when you hear something like that?
You know, we've recognized, and we are very aware, not only in athletics but as an institution, that our football program needs to be better. It needs to be better and be able to compete and be a part of the Power Five, and be a part of any potential, whether it be conference restructuring, be part of any any other reorganization of college athletics. So it's very important to us. We remain committed. That's why we have to continue to invest. I do think, my own opinion is that it is unlikely that football would be separated out. I think this opens the door for us to have more open conversations about maybe a different division of the NCAA or a different organization altogether. I don't think that our sports programs will be separated. I don't think our football program will be separated from our basketball program and the other 16 sports. I think whatever changes happen in the future, it will be done as an athletic department and not with the singling out of a basketball or a football program for a different organization. That's my personal view. That's not the view of the institution. That's not the view of the Big 12 Conference. I'm just speaking for myself.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
All right, I think we will finish with that. Thanks everybody for taking the time, and Jeff, thanks for being available.
Hey,
Thanks,
pleasure
Jeff.
to see all
Thanks,
of you.
Dan.
What was that, Shay?
Thank you, guys.
Oh, thank you guys. Have a great holiday. Enjoy. Hope we'll see you here in Allen Fieldhouse for men's and women's basketball games. And hey, have a safe time. Protect yourself. Be safe. The virus is not gone. And just make sure that you take care of yourself. All the best to you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Dan.